You can just say you're welcome. Committee will be in order. Thank you very much for joining us today. Today we have the business of the House of Representatives that is very important, some business that has been around for a long period of time, and I'm delighted to announce that we will have H.R. 1947, the Federal Agricultural Reform and Risk Management Act of 2013. Please note this is for general debate, not to include amendments that we're here for today. And in the same rule, H.R. 1797, District of Columbia, Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. And today we welcome both the ranking member, a dear friend of this committee, and a statesman of the United States House of Representatives, and a dear friend, the gentleman Colin Peterson, and also the distinguished young chairman from Oklahoma of the Agriculture Committee. And we are delighted that both of you are here today. I would take note, if I can, that there has been a great deal of preparation before today, not only among our staffs, and I would like to, if I can, extend on a bipartisan basis to both of you an expression of thanks to your committee staff in working with our Rules Committee on a bipartisan basis to ensure that we were here prepared with an understanding about how to proceed. And in particular, Mr. Chairman, thank you to your staff who has been exemplary in meeting with me as well as the staff, and I am delighted that you're both here. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Slaughter if she has any opening statement. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to welcome them both as well, and I want to congratulate them for completing a chore that's been around for quite a while. So we look forward to having you up here on the Ag Bill. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Slaughter. Without objection, whatever you have in writing today, we will enter into the record. We're delighted that both of you are here, and I would yield at this time to the gentleman from Oklahoma, the chairman of the committee, gentleman, Mr. Lucas. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking members, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. And I'm pleased to be here alongside my friend and colleague, our ranking member, Colin Peterson. We've worked very closely together with all of our colleagues on the Agriculture Committee to produce a balanced, fair-minded, fiscally responsible farm bill. And this bill, as my colleague will allude to, is an accumulation of years of work. We started the process of holding multi-sets of hearings, including those specifically designed to find ways to improve programs for farmers, increase efficiency, and reduce spending. And that led us to write and mark up H.R. 1947, the Federal Agricultural Reform and Risk Management Act, in an open legislative process. We considered over 100 amendments and debated for more than 12 hours, and the bill passed in what I think could accurately be described as a large bipartisan vote of 36-10. As I mentioned earlier, the bill includes significant reforms. It cuts billions of dollars in mandatory spending by repealing and consolidating more than 100 government programs and reforming others. The agricultural programs are improved to be more cost-effective, more market-oriented. The Farm Act, as I like to refer to it, cuts more than 36% from traditional commodity programs. And we reform the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, for the first time literally in decades. We also make investments in certain important areas such as crop insurance, fruit and vegetable production, farmers markets, and local food systems. And we also provide regulatory relief measures to help mitigate burdens farmers, ranchers, and rural communities face. We accomplish all of this under an open process where everyone on the committee was included, from our freshmen to the most senior members. In order to give the House an opportunity to fully and fairly debate the bill, I ask you to report a rule that is structured in a fashion similar to where everyone has an opportunity to engage in the process. I believe in letting the House work its will. I believe in a good, straightforward debate can create consensus. We did it in the House Agriculture Committee, and we can do it again here. Once again, thank you for your time today. Most assuredly, I'd be happy to address any questions when the time would be appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Gentleman, dear friend of this committee, is recognized, ranking member.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Ranking Member. I'm pleased to be here today with my chairman, Mr. Lucas. We have been at this for a long time, and we actually had the first hearing on this bill when I was chairman. That's how long we've been working on this. And I have to say that in most areas of the bill, if I was still chairman, I wouldn't do anything very much different than what we ended up with. So that's how much we were able to work together. Now, the one area that there's controversy on our side of the aisle is the SNAP program. And some of it, you know, I think this LIHEAP thing is clearly something that should have never happened and needs to be reformed. On the CAT-L, that's a big issue within our caucus. Personally, I think I have a problem with that, too, because you have different people. You have people in different parts of the country qualifying for SNAP based on what state they live in. And I think I would rather see us update the income and asset components of the SNAP program so everybody in the country was treated the same. But, you know, we worked this out in a way that we were able to work it through the committee. So I agree with the chairman that we want to give everybody a chance, you know, to have their say and have their amendments. But we don't need 10 amendments on the same issue, you know, and I think you guys agree with that we can consolidate these down so that everybody gets a shot, but, you know, we don't need to drag things out. So we're glad to be here. We're looking forward to working through this and ending up with hopefully a bipartisan bill on the floor as well and getting into conference and getting this thing resolved. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Mr. Peterson, thank you very much. In fact, as you have now provided in your testimony, the young chairman had previously indicated to me, and we've been trying to work on a process where we're able to avoid redundancy and perhaps outbidding each other, perhaps on an amendment. We're going to take this under advisement as the amendments that have been presented as they come available, and I would hope that you would know and the chairman would know that Mrs. Slaughter and I will look at these, we'll work with each other, and then the committee will make the final recommendation. But we have heard this, and we'll try and abide by as best as possible with the understanding that both of you agree on that issue. And I thank you very much. I'm delighted that you're here, and thank you very much for joining us. Chairman Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a lot to say other than I think I have a rather unique insight into how you two work together, because I quite often sit with Mr. Lucas back in what Oklahomans at least call Lucas Row, and I see how many times that chairman and ranking member over the years, Mr. Peterson's out there, but then I get to go out on the balcony and smoke with Mr. Peterson, so I usually hear his side of the story away from you, Mr. Chairman, and you guys say the same things. So I have to tell you, I thought it was a mistake that we did not have the opportunity to vote on this last year. Honestly, I think this is one of those things that you ought to just try to work through. You found, obviously, bipartisan consensus last year on your committee, worked it through, I think had a good product for us to begin to debate on, but for whatever reason that didn't happen. I'm glad that you've resumed that productive relationship and brought us something together. I have no doubt the House will have a lot of opportunities to look at a lot of amendments and a lot of choices and tweakings, but the underlying product here, the fact that you brought the members of this Congress that know the most about agriculture, who sit on your committee, together in a bipartisan fashion to bring us a bill that I think does have genuine reforms and genuine savings is extraordinarily important. We all know the Senate's got a bill, and if we're fortunate enough to get a bill through here, we'll go to conference, and there'll no doubt be other changes and negotiations there that the two of you will be very deeply involved in. But I just want to thank you for setting the example and showing the American people there are times when we can come together despite our partisan differences, work in a very bipartisan manner, present what I think is a fundamentally strong and good product, go through the amendment process in our chamber, go through the negotiation process with our friends on the other side of the rotunda, and hopefully actually give people some stability. I have to say this, Chairman, too, and again, I don't have a lot of questions, although I certainly turn it over to either one of you for response. I do represent 14,000 farms and ranches. They're right next to Mr. Lucas's farms and ranches, so we probably, my farmers and ranchers tend to look a lot like his and tend to see the world the same way and hold Frank very, I shouldn't say Frank, I should say the chairman, in extremely high regard. But the one thing they do tell me is how much they need certainty, how much in a business that, and it is a business that requires extraordinarily capital investment that both in land and equipment, that in many cases, is dealing with a volatile energy and fertilizer market, primary products, and where they have to make really tough decisions on what are, frankly, relatively narrow margins. If you look at the investments and the capital risk, they need to know, and they need to know not a year at a time, but they need to know several years at a time, because they're going to have to make equipment purchases and planning and crop decisions that span time. And I do think we really owe it, whatever the final product is, to the American farmer and rancher to give them the certainty they need to conduct their business, which is the most productive part of our economy in many ways. The idea that we're looking at a part of our economy that employed 1 out of every 4 Americans as late as, or 5 Americans as late as 1941, is now less than 3% of our workforce and still feeds us and exports to the rest of the world, tells you by and large the American farmer and rancher have done one terrific job, and we must have done a reasonable job over that period of time of at least not getting in their way, of giving them a framework to work in that they could be that productive. So thank you for bringing us back to regular order in a bipartisan way and providing us a very good foundation and a very good framework to move forward with. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. It should be noted that the House chaplain has decided to be with us today, which is also a good either sign or omen. And I would wish that
what he's trying to do, Mr. Chairman, is get in my good graces so I will let him sing in my band.
Well,
that's what's going on.
There's probably some truth to that too.
But he sang with us one night over at the Ag Committee, and he was very good. I'll tell you what, you need to see him perform. He will surprise you. So.
The chaplain being here today should add a bit of certainty to us about what we're trying to do, and I thank the gentleman's comments. The gentlewoman, Ms. Slaughter, is recognized.
Chairman, I'm very disconcerted to see the chaplain's on crutches today. I hope he behaved himself. And
it's all
it wasn't baseball, was it?
It's all sympathy for the committee because Judge Hastings has had this circumstance.
All right. Well, anyway, I just want to put the statement of administrative policy
without objection
in and give most of my time to my colleague here, who's one of the foremost experts in the House on food and feeding people. The administration says that they are very concerned about the cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, and they believe that you could have done the same thing by reducing deficit without creating hardship by reducing crop insurance subsidies. This is, and I'm sure that's not news to you. Rather than reducing crop insurance subsidies by $11.7 billion over 10 years, as the President proposed, it would increase the reference prices for farmers by 45% and increase already generous crop insurance subsidies at a cost of $9 billion over 10 years. That if this bill as it is now should come before the President, that the advisors, his senior advisors, would recommend that he would veto. And I would, Mr. McGovern will be talking about these parts of the bill, and speaks for me as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was with a group this morning at 8 a.m. They asked me to give a speech called "What's Wrong with Washington?" I tried to tell them what was right about Washington. I appreciate what you all have done. I wish we'd had a farm bill last year also. I'm glad we're going to have one this year. But I got to tell you, I'm troubled by that. When you say, Mr. Peterson, that this bill looks a lot like the bill that you would have brought out if you were chairman, and the administration says we're going to veto this bill because we just don't think folks did a good job, I don't know where that takes us. But let me ask you this: I appreciate what you said about allowing the House to work its will in a timely way, but in a thorough way. Are there any poison pills out there, things that, occasionally the folks will come and they'll say, we really would like a structured rule, well, except for this one, except for that energy section, because we really found that delicate balance where only our balance will survive, and if you change this balance at all, the whole house of cards comes down. Is this farm bill that delicate, or has it been built on such a firm foundation the House really can work its will? Mr. Chairman?
Any legislative process has its Achilles heel, of course. When you look at what Colin and I and the committee did, we attempted, as you alluded to achieve a balance. The savings essentially half come from the 80% of the bill that are the feeding programs, social nutrition programs. The other 20% of the other half of the savings, I should say, come from the remaining part of the bill that would be defined as the commodity title, rule of development, the things that usually are considered to be the things that grow the food. What I think Colin and I and the committee attempted to do on the commodity side was to say that certain policies, such as the old direct payment program from 1996, while it might still be the most WTO trade compliant law, was unsustainable in the eyes of the membership and the eyes of the popular press, which sometimes doesn't always get into the details. And at the same time, when we looked at the nutrition side, remember, that's $16 trillion national debt, we looked at the nutrition side. The committee tried to achieve savings in a way that would not, and I make this comment personally, and everyone has their own interpretations, and as was the debate in the committee itself, but we tried to achieve reforms in the nutrition title that would not take a 1 calorie off the plate of a deserving person. Now, in some things like Cat-L, that the ranking member alluded, categorical eligibility, there are a number of states, 40-something approximately, that use some law from the Welfare Reform Act of 1996 to say that if you qualify for certain federal welfare benefits, you automatically get food stamps. We simply say in the bill, you've got to apply. Demonstrate your income, demonstrate your assets, and we'll help you. But you just got to apply. LIHEAP is a program by which, and with category L, it'll be on about $12 billion in our savings. LIHEAP's about $8 billion. LIHEAP's a program where states, a handful of states, have used the flexibility of the 96 law to say that if we are helping you with your home heating costs, then you can automatically qualify for a full month's worth of food stamps. In the bill, we simply say, not to take away states' ability to decide how they should use their own resources, we simply say instead of sending out $1 to get a full month's worth of food stamps, you have to send out $20. That saves about $8 billion. But, that said, the balance between savings on both sides to achieve the $40 billion is, it's just a balance. I'd hope we'd be able to sustain that. There's some areas like the commodity title where we have regional disagreements. An amendment or two dealing with not just shallow lost crop revenue, but the concept of price protection. We have a balance. Whether it's this committee or the will of the floor of the United States House, I would hope in the commodity titles we maintain that balance, that concept called choice, just as we maintain a balance in our overall savings. So short answer is, I think we did a pretty good job, Mr. Woodall. I would hope the committee and the floor of the United States House would agree, but then I'm here subject to the will of the body in both cases.
As you can imagine, as a non-ag expert, I have not made it through every page yet, but I want to make sure I understood your summary, because I tell folks what spoils you about being on the Rules Committee is I get the chairman and the ranking member come up here and give me a private briefing about what's going on before every debate that happens, and it absolutely spoils you. I'm reading the Statement of Administration Policy. It says this bill makes unacceptable deep cuts in SNAP. Did I understand you correctly to say that for folks who apply for and receive food stamp benefits, there's not going to be 1 calorie cut from those plates?
If you qualify by meeting present standards on your assets and on your income, you're going to get the help. But we're going to insist that you go through the process to demonstrate you qualify.
If I could, these changes were made for administrative efficiency. The LIHEAP thing happened in the 80s. The CAD-L happened in 96 when we block granted welfare. We haven't updated the income and asset requirements in the food stamp program for probably 30 years. So it's at 130% of poverty, the income, and there's a $2,000 asset limit, individual $3,500 for a family, and a car limitation. You can't have a car that's worth more than $4,500. Well, those things need to be updated. In this day and age, you want people to work, they got to have a car. So most of the states have eliminated that. So the CAD-L, you've got 9 states that are using the federal requirements. So the people in those states, if they're above 130, they don't get food stamps. But there's probably 14 states that have 200% of poverty. So in those states, you can have a lot more income and get food stamps. Well, I don't think that's right. So the states are deciding who gets food stamps, and then we're paying for it. Well, that's not a very smart system. So I'd like to see us update, raise the income levels, raise the asset levels, and treat everybody in the country the same. That's what I'd like to see us do. We couldn't get that done. And one further thing on the LIHEAP, we send $4 billion a year to the states. That's the block grant that we send out for LIHEAP. Under the CBO score, what's in our bill, they say 850,000 households will be affected by this $20 requirement. Currently, if you give somebody $1 under LIHEAP, they can get the food stamp utility allowance, which in some cases is $600 a month. What we're saying is, well, instead of giving $1, you've got to give them $20. So you take $20 times 850,000, that's $1.7 million out of $4 billion. So the states all they'd have to do is give 0.3% of the money that we're giving them to the people that are currently in the system, and they'd still qualify. Now, you tell me that they're not going to do that. I think they are.
Well, I think
the CBO score is a bunch of baloney, frankly. But
I think they would too, and candidly, clearly, if you're giving $1 to somebody for energy assistance, I don't know what energy prices are like in Minnesota, but $1 doesn't go very far in the state.
It's your way to get around the income.
Yeah, that's just gaming the system, and
that should be changed.
It does. I come from a community that wants to help folks. We've got a lot of farmers. We've got a lot of recipients of food stamps. And it's those kinds of gamings of the system that undermines people's faith that their tax dollars, which they are happy to give to folks in need, are actually going to folks in need. I thank you both for your work. I don't expect to like every line in the Farm Bill, but I do expect to feel good about doing something instead of just throwing up our hands and saying we can't do anything at all.
You asked about deal breakers. The dairy, I've worked on this for 4 years, and we need to reform this system. Well, the Speaker and I have a different viewpoint. This goes back to the 90s. Well, I think he feels so strongly about this that this is almost a deal breaker for him, and I feel so strongly it's almost a deal breaker for me. And either one of us took that position, we could kill this bill. We're not going to do that. We're going to let the body work its will, live with the results. One of us isn't going to be happy. But that's the way the process works. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman, Mr. McGovern's recognized.
Thank you,
yes,
Mr. Chairman. And
yes,
let me first of all say that I have the privilege of also serving on the Agriculture Committee. And I think it is a privilege. And I do have great respect for the chairman and the ranking member, who I think have worked tirelessly to try to put something together that I think could get a majority of votes on the House floor and go on to conference. And so I respect their work. I respect the way they have conducted themselves in committee and the fairness that they've extended to me, who's kind of a contrarian on this issue, because I do think the SNAP cuts are not, it's not about gaming the system. I think they cut very deeply, and I think they are going to hurt people. But I was able to offer an amendment in the committee and was given the courtesy of allowing that debate to go on for quite some time, and I appreciate that from both the chairman and the ranking member. And so I said, thank you. I'm going to try to bring an amendment to the floor on SNAP, because I think we ought to have a debate on it. Under the rules of the House, I can't bring the same amendment to the floor that I brought to the committee, because in the committee I was able to bring an amendment that said that we would cancel the cuts. I now have to find $20.5 billion of offsets to be able to have an amendment that is germane, unless they want to waive the rules, which I don't think they're going to do for me. But if Louise were chairwoman, she'd waive the rules for me. But in any event, so I'm trying to find $20.5 billion of offsets to bring an amendment to the floor, and I hope that we will be able to debate it. And I hope that on this issue, and I'm not sure how the time is going to be allocated, but given the fact that SNAP takes such a big hit, we have the tendency to do the 10-minute amendments, 5 on each side. I really do think that this subject is important enough on both sides that there ought to be more than 10 minutes, 5 on each side, on whatever SNAP amendment this committee makes in order, because I do think this for me is the deal breaker. I think for a lot of others it is, but we ought to have a chance to kind of fully air things out. I would just say to my colleagues, we talk about Cat-L, and which a lot of people don't know what it is, but it actually was an idea, I think, by John Kasich, who was a pretty conservative guy, who was a member here, who was trying to reduce the amount of bureaucracy and paperwork, that you go through to be able to get people eligible for the programs that they're eligible for. So a lot of states have saved money through the streamlining of the process. And we could argue about the LIHEAP thing, but at the end of the day, the people we're talking about getting this benefit aren't rich people. They're poor people. And CBO says that 2 million people will lose, if we keep the $20.5 billion cut, will lose their benefit. We're told that 210,000 kids will no longer be qualified for the free breakfast and lunch program at school. And I should also tell you that before we even talk about the Farm Bill and additional cuts, because we've been dipping into SNAP for other things, come November, if we do nothing, the average family of 3 will receive between a $25 and $35 reduction per month in their benefit if we did nothing. And quite frankly, that was a mistake by Democrats and Republicans and by this administration to kind of use this program as kind of a piggy bank, but nonetheless, we were sure that the money would be replaced. Obviously, it's not going to be replaced, so that's where we begin. We already begin with the cut for these families. And so, there's a lot in this Farm Bill that I think is really good, and that the chairman and the ranking member skillfully were able to negotiate, because no one's happy with everything. There are some things in this bill, everybody on the committee has their own kind of special, unique perspective. Some people it's cotton, some people it's peanuts, some people it's sugar, and I'm learning now some people it's sushi rice, which got I think a pretty nice deal. But having said all of that, my colleagues on the Ag Committee have heard me enough in committee. But I would just plead for there to be a debate on SNAP. I'm going to fight back on this. And as I told you both, I think this cut goes too deep, that if it's not fixed, then I'm going to fight against the Farm Bill because I just don't think it's the right way to go. I understand where you're coming from, that maybe we'll fix it in conference or things will get better. But we're not voting on, what we're voting on is what we're voting on. But I think there ought to be a debate, and we had that in the committee, and I appreciate that. I think we ought to have it on the floor. And we will, and having said all of that, I'm not going to, I'll wait to debate this at the appropriate time. But notwithstanding my disagreements with the final product, I have incredible admiration for the two gentlemen who are sitting here, because I think, and I think in a perfect world, if there weren't all these kind of pressures, and I think maybe things might be a little bit different, maybe more in my favor on this. I'm not sure, but that's my inclination. So, having said that, I yield back my time and look forward to.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman, Mr. Nugent, recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I really appreciate Mr. McGovern. I know he comes from the heart when he talks about SNAP. But obviously you had a lot of input at the Ag Committee level, which is good to hear. I'm really pleased to see, though, that our ranking member and chairman, everybody doesn't get everything they want. And you're both shaking your heads, absolutely. And I know that, the ranking member talked about the speaker and how one of them is going to prevail and one isn't. And obviously the speaker could have put the kibosh to it and stop it, and he didn't. And you could do the same. And so I think it says a lot about the way truly bipartisan committee work is supposed to happen, and that it allows the will of the House to move this bill forward. I was surprised last year when we didn't get to hear it, being, in my second year last year. It's like, why? But, all good things take time. And I think that you have crafted, obviously you've worked on it a long time and stuck with it in perseverance, and we're going to get an opportunity to hear it on the floor and vote on it and any amendments that come forward. So I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields his time. Gentleman, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do appreciate the chairman and ranking member being here with us today. I know how hard they've worked on this. It's the 80th anniversary of the first Farm Bill was passed. Now, I guess the first one, Mr. Lucas tells me, was not constitutional, but nevertheless, it is the 80th anniversary year of the farm legislation. I am concerned about the price tag on this. I hope that during the amendment process we can work on that. But I do want to acknowledge there has been a tremendous amount of work that has gone into this product. And the good news is we have it in rules, and we're going to have an amendment process that will try to perfect it, and we'll see where we end up at the end of the week. With that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. On behalf of the committee, I want to express confidence in not only the process that you followed, but to thank both of you for your years of service to the men and women in rural areas who provide the food, the hard work, the commitment to make our country strong and great. I recognize also that it's our farmers that struggle with the things we do here in Washington. Sometimes it's water, sometimes it's energy policy, other times it's tax policy. But I represented a rural district for some 6 years, my first 6 years in Congress. And quite honestly, I've never been around a group of people who cared more about this country. They understood hard work, they understood commitment, they understood contribution, they understood family. They understood what kind of community and support that it took. And all across this country, we have different pockets, from strawberries to avocados to corn, cotton, cranberries, cattle. We have almonds, pecans. There you go, Mr. Chairman. You can list some of your favorites. But the bottom line is that there are things that reside in every one of them. and in their spouse who gets up and works just as hard as who's ever, their names are on these loans that they take out too, and their names are on the hard work and the families that have for so many years made our country strong and better. So I want to thank both of you for bringing a product that you both stand behind. I want to thank the members of this committee that serve on your committee, and I appreciate and respect what you're doing. This committee is going to attempt to do as you've suggested, to sift through the amendments that have been presented to us. We're going to continue to work with you, and as the gentleman, Mr. McGovern, has suggested, he believes an ample debate should make itself available on these important ideas that have flowed not through just this committee, but your committee also. So on behalf of the Rules Committee, I see where the gentlewoman, the chairwoman, Roz Layton, has come in just perfect timing. I don't know if you have any questions for either of our witnesses.
Chairman, I just wanted to congratulate both gentlemen for the great work that they have presented before us. Thank you.
So both of you have presented yourself here. You've made yourself available for questions. You're now excused, and I thank you very, very much as we move forward to this process. We look forward to continuing our work with you. Gentlemen are excused at this time. Thank you very much. Good. Thank you very much. The committee now recognizes, for the purpose of H.R. 1797, the piece of legislation out of the Committee on Judiciary, and we would welcome the gentleman, Mr. Nadler, and recognize that the gentleman, Mr. Goodlatte, is walking through our door as we speak, and we would welcome both of you to the committee. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be entered into the record. We recognize that both of you are on a deadline. We are too. We're delighted that you're here. I have no opening statement. Does the gentlewoman wish to make an opening statement? No opening statement. Mr. Chairman, we're delighted that you're here. Mr. Nadler, as always, welcome to the Rules Committee.
Thank you.
Your presence, your ideas, and your working towards the betterment of the ideas which you strongly believe in are welcome in this committee. And at this time, the gentleman, the young chairman of the Judiciary Committee from Virginia, is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Sessions, for this opportunity to testify regarding H.R. 1797, the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, which the Judiciary Committee reported favorably last week. Since the Supreme Court's controversial decision in Roe v. Wade in 1973, medical knowledge regarding the development of unborn babies and their capacities at various stages of growth has advanced dramatically. Even the New York Times has reported on the latest research on unborn pain, focusing in particular on the research of Dr. Suni Anand, an Oxford-trained neonatal pediatrician who has held appointments at Harvard Medical School and other distinguished institutions. According to the New York Times, 25 years ago, doctors were convinced that newborns' nervous systems were too immature to sense pain. Anand resolved to find out if this was true. In a series of clinical trials, he demonstrated that operations performed under minimal or no anesthesia produced a massive stress response in newborn babies, releasing a flood of fight or flight hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Potent anesthesia, he found, could significantly reduce this reaction. But Anand was not through making observations. He noticed that even the most premature babies grimaced when pricked by a needle. New evidence, however, has persuaded him that fetuses can feel pain by 20 weeks gestation and possibly earlier. Dr. Anand would later testify, if the fetus is beyond 20 weeks of gestation, I would assume that there will be pain caused to the fetus, and I believe it will be severe and excruciating pain. Congress has the power to acknowledge these developments by prohibiting abortions after the point at which scientific evidence shows the unborn can feel pain, with limited exceptions. H.R. 1797 does just that. It also includes provisions to protect the life of the mother. The terrifying facts uncovered during the course of the trial of late-term abortionist Kermit Gosnell and successive reports of similar atrocities committed across the country remind us how an atmosphere of insensitivity can lead to horrific brutality. The grand jury report in the Gosnell case itself contains references to a neonatal expert who reported that the cutting of the spinal cords of babies intended to be late-term aborted would cause them, and I quote, a tremendous amount of pain. These facts and others justify expanding the application of this bill nationwide, as was done when the Subcommittee on the Constitution and Civil Justice adopted Chairman Frank's Manager's Amendment. Indeed, the polling company recently found that 64% of Americans would support a law such as the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. Only 30% would oppose it, and supporters include 47% of those who identify themselves as pro-choice in the poll, as well as 63% of women. In the 2007 case of Gonzalez versus Carhart, the Supreme Court made clear that, and I quote, the government may use its voice and its regulatory authority to show its profound respect for the life within the woman, and that Congress may show such respect for the unborn through specific regulation because it implicates additional ethical and moral concerns that justify a special prohibition. Justice Kennedy, who wrote the majority opinion in the Carhart case, also wrote that the government has an interest in forbidding medical procedures which, in the government's reasonable determination, might cause the medical profession or society as a whole to become insensitive, even disdainful to life, including life in the human fetus, even life which cannot survive without the assistance of others. As the New York Times story concluded, throughout history, a presumed insensitivity to pain has been used to exclude some of humanity's privileges and protections. Over time, the charmed circle of those considered alive to pain and therefore fully human has widened to include members of other religions and races, the poor, the criminal, the mentally ill, and thanks to the works of Suni Anand and others, the very young. The Gosnell trial reminds us that when newborn babies are cut with scissors, they whimper and cry and flinch from pain. And unborn babies, when harmed, also whimper and cry and flinch from pain. Delivered or not, babies are babies, and they can feel pain by at least 20 weeks. It is time to welcome young children who can feel pain into the human family, and this bill at last will do just that. Again, I thank the chairman for the opportunity to testify, and I hope the committee will grant an appropriate rule that allows for swift consideration of this important legislation.
Mr. Chairman, the discussion that you've just had with this committee is compelling, and I appreciate you taking time not only to be here today, but to push the ideas that the committee has passed, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nadler is recognized. Mr. Nadler, if you could please make sure that that mic is on. I can't tell from here if it is or not. Thank you.
I don't know if it's on, but the light is on.
That's good. That's good enough for me, and I'm sorry I was unable to see it. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we're back again considering legislation that would curtail women's reproductive rights. This legislation is especially dangerous for two reasons. First, it is clearly unconstitutional. Second, it is based upon a complete falsehood. The legislation contains a finding of fact, a finding of science that fetuses feel pain at 20 weeks, as if Congress knows that. This is a very minority opinion in the medical community. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the British Medical Society, all have said this is not true. Dr. Anon, quoted by the distinguished chairman, testified in this issue in 2005 that he thought, quote, the evidence for and against fetal pain is very uncertain at the present time. He further observed that, quote, there is consensus in the medical and scientific research community that there is no possibility of pain perception in the first trimester. There is uncertainty in the second trimester. There is no discussion in the third trimester. So the most medical researchers, the overwhelming majority, say that a fetus at 20 weeks does not feel pain. A few dissent from that, and Congress is finding as a fact, since we're scientists, that the dissenters, the small minority, are right. I don't think it's our business to make scientific findings in which we have no competence to do. Let me say second, before I get to the constitutionality, Dr. Gosnell was mentioned, and it's been mentioned throughout this discussion. It is a total red herring with reference to this bill. What Dr. Gosnell did was murder, plain and simple. He killed infants born alive. We did not oppose, we supported the Born Alive Infants Protection Act when it was 10 years ago, because it is clear that that is murder, that a born alive infant is murder, killing that infant is murder under the laws of every state. The Born Alive Infants Protection Act was redundant, but we wanted to support it to give the lie to anyone who said that
there was any similarity, that people who supported abortion, the right to choose an abortion, also supported infanticide. And as horrible as everything Dr. Gosnell did was, it was murder, it was illegal, and it has nothing to do with what we're discussing. The bill is also dangerous because it is unconstitutional. It contains a nearly total ban on abortions prior to viability, which the Supreme Court says violates women's rights under the Constitution, and perhaps most cruelly, it fails even to provide any exception for a woman's health. The exception for women's life is, an exception for women's health is clearly required if any bill is going to be constitutional. The exception for women's life is so narrowly written and so convoluted that even a physician wanting to comply with the law in good faith would have trouble determining when the woman is sufficiently an extremist that her condition qualifies as a, quote, life-endangering physical condition caused by or arising from the pregnancy itself, but not including psychological or emotional conditions, close quote, which we are told excludes the risk of suicide. Recently added language is supposed to take the heat off the recent uproar over the absence of a rape and incest exception in the bill. The language, however, is outrageously written. It would provide an exception for rape or incest only if the victim first reported the rape or the incest to the authorities. Now, in the best of all possible worlds, it would be great if every assault were reported and every rapist prosecuted. But we all know that there are many reasons why many rapes don't get reported. The sponsor of this legislation, who is also the sponsor of the Crime Victims' Rights Constitutional Amendment, must surely have an appreciation for the toll our criminal justice system takes on rape victims. The humiliation, the harassment, having to face sometimes heartless cross-examination, having to appear in the press, or as we have all seen all too often, having to face death threats from friends and neighbors of the perpetrators. In cases of incest, there is often the added trauma of having to endure the abuse by a parent or other close adult over a period of many years. Coming forward in those cases is extremely difficult and sometimes takes years, if ever, for the victim to acknowledge it. So there are many reasons why women don't report abuse. Why force them to? The only reason we were given in markup is that women lie. So the authors of this bill apparently believe that women are too dishonest to be believed when they state they were raped or the victims of incest. That's a heck of an insult. It is cynical and cruel to assume that this is a reasonable requirement. In fact, it is using the trauma of the assault to erect another unnecessary and cruel barrier to a raped woman. It is Congress siding with her abuser to force her to carry that abuser's child to term. Are we really going to side with rapists and child abusers here? I hope not. Piled up on this is yet another truly upsetting restriction. The incest exemption only applies if the victim was a minor when the incest occurred. What are people thinking? That somehow the incest was nice, consensual sex? Do members really believe that if a young woman is abused by her father starting, let's say, from the age of 8, and he gets her pregnant when she's 18, that it doesn't count? Or that she asked for it? Is it going to be the official policy of the United States that she deserves it? I would also remind members that this is not, but that's the way this bill is written. I would also remind members that this is not the way we have put this restriction into law in the past. The exception for rape and incest is just that, for rape and incest. No conditions, no restrictions. The most recently enacted Labor HHS Appropriations Bill, for example, said in Section 507A, quote, the limitations established in the preceding section shall not apply to abortion if the pregnancy is the result of an act of rape or incest. Close quote. There is no authority that it be reported to there is no requirement, that it be reported to the authorities. No restriction that the victim must be a minor. Yet now, some members want to redefine rape and incest to redefine the exemption for rape and incest to the ban on abortion to satisfy an extremist base that wants to outlaw all abortions, even for victims of rape and incest. I hope that my colleagues here today will at least agree, even if they don't want to approve an exception for rape or incest, that many women do become pregnant as a result of rape and incest. Ranking Member Conyers and I have submitted amendments that deserve to be debated because they address critical issues in this bill. My amendment, which I have submitted with our colleagues Mel Watt, Susan Delbene, and Sheila Jackson-Lee, would provide the constitutionally required life and health exception. Whether members like it or not, that is what the Constitution requires, and the amendment ought to be made in order. Mr. Conyers has submitted an amendment that would provide an exception for rape and incest. It looks like the language members here have voted for before, for example, in the Labor HHS Appropriations Bill, and in many other bills. No requirement that a woman be subject to public shaming or abuse in our criminal justice system. No exclusion of adult victims of incest, just an exception for rape or incest. I hope that we can agree that no woman should ever be forced to carry her abuser's child. I urge the committee to make both of these amendments in order. The bill introduced would prohibit nearly all abortions beginning at 20 weeks. That, as every first-year law student will tell you, is facially unconstitutional. Just recently, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit struck down a nearly identical Arizona statute saying, quote, this is the opinion of the Ninth Circuit, since Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court case law concerning the constitutional protection accorded women with respect to the decision whether to undergo an abortion has been unalterably clear regarding one basic point. A woman has a constitutional right to choose to terminate her pregnancy before the fetus is viable. A prohibition on the exercise of that right is per se unconstitutional, close quote. The majority in this House often beats its chest about adherence to the Constitution. We read the Constitution at the beginning of the session, but now it advances an obviously and clearly and unquestionably unconstitutional bill. We all took an oath to, quote, support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and bear true faith and allegiance to the same, close quote. I would urge my colleagues to reflect on that oath as we consider this legislation. While some may hope that the Supreme Court will ultimately move in a different direction on these questions, the fact remains that 40 years after Roe v. Wade, even this far more conservative and hostile court has declined every opportunity to do so. The law is clear that this is unconstitutional, and we ought to be true to our oath and endeavor to pass legislation only that comports with the clear requirements of the Constitution. I would hope that the members of this House would reject this legislation if for no other reason. I urge this committee to report an open rule so that we may have the opportunity to debate the critical issues affecting women's lives and health raised by this dangerous legislation, and I would further urge that if they cannot report an open rule, they at least report a rule making in order the amendments to give a clean and clear rape and incest exception to the ban, and a clear exception for the life and health of the mother, and the amendments that I mentioned previously. I thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Nadler and the Chairman, thank you very much for being here today and bringing us legislation. Gentlemen, Mr. Bishop's recognized. No questions. Ms. Slaughter.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Interesting to see you here this afternoon. Mr. Goodley, I really need to bring this up. Judiciary Committee, Republican side, majority side is 22 men, correct?
23 now that we've been joined by Jason Smith.
23 men, no women. Correct?
Oh, that's absolutely correct.
All right. An amendment brought up, I believe, by Mr. Nadler, I'm not certain about that, Conyers, to give the usual protection for persons who have been raped or been impregnated by incest. The turnover, that did not happen. That vote was what, 22 or 23?
I don't recall the exact vote, but it was defeated.
It was unanimous on your side.
That's correct.
All right. Now, a strange thing happened after that vote. That was a legitimate vote, right? But despite that, you all didn't have the power to shut that whole thing down. And when that legitimate vote came up here, it was turned around, and an exception for rape and incest was put in there. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think it's happened until the Rules Committee acts, but we're prepared to accept that. The gentleman is quite right that there is, in many abortion bills, an exception for rape and incest. The belief of the members of the committee in the majority was that because these are late-term abortions, and therefore a woman experiencing a rape had many months to consider whether or not they wanted to get an abortion, and you're now talking about a baby that's capable of experiencing pain. The view was that there did not need to be an exception, but we are also content with having that provision in the bill if the committee so chooses to put that in there.
Well, I think all the members are cognizant of the fact that this is not a Congress that cares much about science.
Well, I think this Congress cares a lot about science, and I think this legislation is based upon the recognition that since 1973, we as a society and our medical profession has learned a lot more about the unborn than we knew when that opinion was written, and I think it's reflected in Justice Kennedy's opinion in the Carhart case when he noted that government government has an interest in forbidding medical procedures which, in the government's reasonable determination, might cause the medical profession or society as a whole to become insensitive, even disdainful to life, including life in the human fetus, even life which cannot survive without the assistance of others. To the point raised by the gentleman from New York, it's not simply about viability. It's also about the ability of unborn children to experience pain.
I thought that the gentleman from New York made pretty clear that that was not any definitive answer. Is that correct, Mr. Nadler?
Well, yes. The fact is that the overwhelming majority of experts in the field think that at this point, either that most seem to feel that a fetus cannot feel pain at 20 weeks. Some think that there is uncertainty about that. The minority, they're a very small minority, they're really outliers, including the witnesses brought by the majority into the committee, say that they can feel pain, fetuses can feel pain at 20 weeks. Even Dr. Anand, who is one of the lead witnesses for the majority, I read his quote. His quote says, there is consensus in the medical and scientific research community that there is no possibility of pain perception in the first trimester, uncertainty in the second trimester, no discussion, that is, they can feel pain in the third trimester. The British Medical Society has published a study recently saying there's no perception of pain at 20 weeks. The American College, ACOG, American College of Gynecologists and Obstetricians, published a similar study. I think it's fair to say that the opinion that fetuses at 20 weeks can feel pain, it's not just a minority opinion, it's an outlying opinion, a very small minority.
Well, I'm going to save most of my conversation for tomorrow because I'll be carrying this for a minority. But I think that the American people are getting pretty disgusted with a group of men in blue suits and red ties deciding what the women of America can do because they're not to be trusted. I think Jerry mentioned some point that there was said at the committee that they lie, that they could not be trusted. I can remember hearing that in the past here in the House of Representatives. Their usual exception is their own mother. Other than that, the rest of us can't be trusted. But let me give the administration's statement of policy, and we'll be ready for tomorrow. 40 years ago, the Supreme Court affirmed a woman's constitutional right to privacy, including the right to choose. This bill is a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade, shows contempt for women's health and rights, the role the doctors play in their patients' health care decisions, and the Constitution. The administration is continuing its efforts to reduce unintended pregnancies, to expand access to contraception, to support maternal and child health, and minimize the need for abortion. At the same time, the administration is committed to the protection of women's health and reproductive freedom and to supporting women and families in the choices they make. This president would be advised to veto this bill in its present form. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back her time. Chairman Cole's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a quick comment. This is obviously a very emotional issue. It's a very profound issue, and dealing with issues that are both profound and divisive is always an uncomfortable thing to do. And you're both excellent legislators and honestly have the respect of people on both sides of the aisle because you're serious about what you do. You always bring serious arguments. And I want to thank you, Chairman, for dealing with a difficult issue where a lot of people, will take a cheap shot at you or question your motives or what have you. If we hadn't dealt with separate but equal for a lot of years, it'd still be separate from equal if we accepted what the Supreme Court said in 1893 and wisely reversed itself on in 1954. So I think we respect the Supreme Court, and I think it's always appropriate to discuss whether we think an issue is constitutional, but we ought to recognize our opinions change on that over time. And if you don't actually discuss and present the issue, you don't have that opportunity for opinion to change. So, again, I think you're both to be commended here. I've got very strong opinion on this legislation, but I appreciate the passion with which you both argue, and I appreciate the opportunity. I maybe don't always appreciate it, but by forcing us to vote on it, you make us think about it, and you make every member of the chamber put themselves down on what they think at least is the right side of the issue and maybe the right side of history. But they got to make a judgment on things like this. In another life, I used to, as my good friend Mr. Goodlatte knows, advise candidates. And I used to say, there's a lot of issues that you can have a lot of leeway on. People know that you don't maybe know what rural water policy is. There's some things in your gut they expect you to be able to answer to them honestly. I think you force us all, regardless of which side of this issue we're on, to confront this honestly and to let our constituents know. And in that, regardless of what happens to the legislation, I think you perform a really profound public service. So I appreciate both of you. I have no questions about the legislation, but again, appreciate both of you, and particularly appreciate you for coming here and arguing the positions. I know you'll do it expertly when we consider the bill, but I think it's a topic that our society needs to keep talking about, needs to be thinking about, keep thinking about, and I think you both provide a service when you make sure that we do that.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Yield back.
Gentleman yields his time. Gentleman, Mr. McGovern is recognized.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman for coming here. I realize that people have strong opinions on this issue on both sides. I guess I would just take a little bit of a different tack than my colleague, Mr. Cole. I wish you weren't bringing this to the floor. This is not an issue that is going to be taken up by the Senate. Certainly, it's not going to be embraced by the White House. It's divisive, and even kind of the process, the very kind of almost very kind of partisan I say partisan breakdown in terms of votes. I wasn't there during the debate, but it just seems to me that we have so much to do to help people, and this is kind of like a wedge that I think will just divide us even more. I've been here now since 1996 as a member of Congress, and every time there's a debate on abortion, it's pretty emotional, pretty divisive, and I'm not sure either side gets convinced of anything. So I'm not sure why at this particular time the leadership here thinks it's important to bring this to the floor. I tend to be supportive of the comments of our ranking member, Ms. Slaughter. I really wish we weren't bringing this to the floor. And especially with some of the significant issues that Mr. Nadler has identified. Anyway, we'll give it a rule, and it'll be debated tomorrow, I guess. So, anyway, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields his time. The gentleman, Mr. Nugent. No questions. Gentleman, Judge Hastings. Yes, sir.
Being late to the meeting, but I had another meeting that I had to attend as well. My colleague, Mr. Cole, always makes very profound statements that I tend to agree more with than less. But I think Mr. McGovern brings this home, gentlemen, and I do thank both of you for your respective efforts, and I know those efforts. I've served here with both of you through all of the various debates over the years, beginning with the partial abortion ban in 2003. So I have great respect for both of you and for those members, male or female, that come to this issue. It's an issue that I suspect is not going to be decided anytime soon favorably to either side. And I agree with Mr. McGovern that we bring it here under some ages suggesting that it's going to be law, when in fact it is not. And we all know that. And I just am personally tired of us having exercises that in the final analysis, any way you cut it, are political. And that's what we do. We do politics, and I understand that. But it seems to me, in a society that is as divided as ours is, and I comment to my friends all the time, that I don't think we're a 50-50 society. I think we're a 40-40 society, and 20% of the people are in a variety of categories. And one of the more interesting parts of that 20% are people that just don't give a happy hoot about what it is that's going on at all, period, over and out, and are just not in the mix on any subject. And if you think that's not true, walk around your district and ask people who their person is, and you'll find out right away that a lot of us are not as known as we think we are for whatever it is we think we are known. The thing that I bring to your attention is this. We will have this debate. The Senate will not take it up. Ms. Slaughter introduced the President's or the administration's position. She did not mention that the last sentence of it suggests that the persons in the administration would recommend to the President that he veto the measure, and it would be my belief that the President will veto it. So then why are we doing this when, let me just suggest a few things. I don't mean to burden you all with a litany of the events dealing with children, but many of us in this room were children that were born in poverty, and we managed to rise out of it, and we managed to help others, and are still doing so to a relative degree. But the simple fact of the matter is we have more children in America that are impoverished today than at any time in my 76 years on earth. I do an awful lot of work in the area and always have in the area of foster care. We have a gap in foster care when young people age out of the system between 18 and 21. Their care and upkeep, no matter how well it has been, drops off, and they find themselves in circumstances in various states, and especially in Florida, are not being appropriately cared for. I spent 2.5 years of my life on the juvenile court and the circuit court in Fort Lauderdale, Broward County. During that period of time, I saw a significant number of minority children that were orphans, and nobody would adopt them at all. And we have, as I said, the number of children that are impoverished. We're getting ready in the Farm Bill to debate the nutrition issue. And I don't know about y'all's schools, but I know about mine in the area that I serve. And I know several of the schools that the children, 85% of them, get their only meal at school. And that's a couple of the schools that serve breakfast and lunch. So I can't spend an awful lot of time on an issue that I know is going nowhere when there are issues that we could do something about and go somewhere, and we are ignoring them. So what I would hope that you would do with children being killed, just like in Chicago this past weekend, children killing each other, children finding guns that their fathers leave and taking them to school this past week. 7-year-old killed in my community with guns this week. And here we are debating something and ignoring gun legislation during the time when we could. So useless exercises might very well appeal to certain sectors of the electorate, but they don't appeal to me as a congressperson, and I don't believe they appeal to my congressional writing. And toward that end, I think that this is useless, and I won't talk about it on the floor because I think it only adds to the divisiveness in an already seriously divided and poisoned nation that we should be trying to do more to reconcile the differences that exist among us rather than continue to hammer and cause further division. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman, Mr. Webster. No question. Gentleman, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this is a subject that I do know something about. And I will just tell you, from the delivery of thousands of babies, attending thousands of women during their pregnancy, performance of thousands of sonograms, there's no question in my mind, that a baby at 20 weeks after conception can feel pain. The fact of the matter is, I argued with the chairman because I thought the date was far too late. We should be setting this at 15 weeks, 16 weeks. You watch a sonogram at a 15-week baby, and they have movements that are purposeful. They stroke their face. If they're a male baby, they may have their hand between their legs. I mean, they feel pleasure. Why is it so hard to think that they could feel pain? Yeah, sometimes we have to give voice to the voiceless, and this is one of those times. No 20-week fetus could vote for any one of us. But the fact of the matter is, do they not deserve our protection? States changed the administration of capital punishment in this country when, 1960s? And the reason they did was because they felt it was cruel and unusual to use those methods for execution that were previously in use. So now what do? We take someone and we anesthetize them before we administer the lethal medications. But we don't do that to a baby who's being aborted at 20 weeks gestation. They can be ripped from limb to limb. That's got to be unbelievably painful. And of course, no one knows, no one witnesses it. Well, sonogram has provided us a window into that world that, quite frankly, did not exist when the Supreme Court rendered their opinion. I agree with the statements of the gentleman from Oklahoma. The Supreme Court did revisit an opinion that they found later on to be terribly wrong. I believe this is one that they will have to revisit, and it's legislation like this and the debate that will happen tomorrow that will cause them to do that revision. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful that the gentleman brought the bill to the floor. I'm grateful to be having the debate tomorrow. I think this is something to which a great deal of attention needs to be paid. And let's not have the specious argument that a baby at 20 or 22 weeks gestation is in some sort of free-floating coma and they are not going to be sentient beings until that magic 7th or 8th month. No, they've got all the accoutrements of humanity at that point in their development, and they are capable of feeling just as much as anyone in this room is capable of feeling. They're capable of feeling pain. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time, and I'll yield back.
Thank the gentleman very much, gentleman. Dr. Burgess yields back his time. I want to thank each of our members of the Rules Committee for being here today. You have heard a very sobering opportunity by both of our members who see this debate. I would offer my own perspective in that I believe both the bills that have been here today, notwithstanding you may be opposed to them or for them, I recognize the President of the United States opposes both of them. But both bills have been presented with fair argument today to the members. It's a debate that takes place in our country. The Farm Bill, on another matter, which was previously spoken about, comes on a bipartisan basis as a result of an incredible amount of work, and the President of the United States would oppose that. I don't think that because the President would oppose this or that bill is a reason why we would not do our work. And it is my hope that the work product that we agree on tonight, Farm Bill as well as this bill, is worthy to the American people, that their representatives, their members of Congress, are able to come to Washington, D.C. and express their ideas, whether you represent the Farm Bill or this bill. And I admire both of you for taking time to come here today. The committee, I've notified the gentlewoman, Ms. Slaughter, the ranking member, that we're going to be in recess subject to call the show till 6:30. And I would thank both of you for being here today and excuse both of you at this time. And we'll be at subject to call the chair until that time.
Start.
Committee will be in order, and thank you very much. It's now 6:30, and we announced that we would come back. Chair will now be in receipt of a motion from the gentleman from Utah.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant a rule providing for consideration of H.R. 1947, the Federal Agricultural Reform and Risk Management Act 2013. The rule provides for 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair. Ranking minority member of the Committee on Agriculture, the rule waives all points of orders against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that after general debate, the committee on the whole shall rise without motion and no further consideration of the bill may be in order except pursuant to a subsequent order of the House. Section 2 of the rule provides for the consideration of H.R. 1979, the District of Columbia Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act under a closed rule. The rule provides for 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary. The rule provides that an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-15 should be considered as adopted, and the bill as amendment shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions of the bill as amended. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
You've now heard the motion from the gentleman from Utah. I'll take just a second, if I can, to describe the rule that's before us, H.R. 1797, the Unborn Pain Bill. It's a closed rule, provides 1 hour general debate controlled by the Committee on Judiciary. H.R. 1797, Farm Bill, Rule Number 1. This is a general debate rule, provides 1 hour of general debate controlled by the Committee on Agriculture, and we will report a second rule tomorrow to address the nearly 230 amendments that were submitted with a deadline today to the Rules Committee. And the committee is now open for debate or further amendment to the bill. Gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 1797 an open rule so that all members have an opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor.
The gentleman, Mr. McGovern, makes an amendment. It would ask for an open rule. I would advise that I believe that what we've done here is in keeping with what we can effectively get done this week in our work level. Those in favor of the McGovern amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it, noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask for an open rule?
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
I ask for a roll call vote. Yeah.
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Ross-Leitman. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, no. Ms. Slaughter. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings.
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Not agreed to. A further debate or amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. Move the committee make an order en bloc and give the necessary waivers for the amendments by Representatives Conyers, Nadler, and Jackson Lee's numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4.
A gentleman brings his amendment forward. Further debate. I would offer an opportunity that this is an issue that is going to be pretty clearly laid out for the members, and I think that we have done that under the bill. Those in favor of the Hastings Amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Ross-Leitman. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, no. Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report total.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
Amendment's not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion by the gentleman from Utah. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. And we will have Mrs. Fox, who will be the manager for the amendment.
Well, I'm doing half of it, I guess.
It's one rule.
One rule. Okay. Shoot. I want to spend all the time on the abortion bill.
Well, the
I
gentlewoman,
just can't do it. All right, I'll do it.
we'll talk you into it.
All right, talk me into it. I'll do my part.
The gentlewoman, the ranking member of the committee will do her duty, and we appreciate it. You know, I'm starting to get that feeling, Louise, I'm starting to get that feeling. Okay, we will plan to meet tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. on amendments. Committee is now complete its work for the day.